Hey everybody, and thank you for joining me in this video. So we are finally now ready to get into the Your First 60 Minutes with motion matching. So I do have my character up on the screen where, I have made some tweaks and stuff like that, so he looks a lot better, as well as being able to fix hand-eye decay and other stuff. So this series is actually going to be pretty good. But we are going to focus primarily on the Your First 60 Minutes and this, and then we'll be making the adjustments as we go along with it, right? So we're going to have stuff like the aim offset that you see here, the nice little movements that's going on here, the jumps that we have, stuff like that. And so when you look at it, basically we are going to be setting it up similar to Gasp in a way, but however, /comma, like I said, we are going to be going through the Your First 60 Minutes with motion matching first. So in this video specifically, we are going to be starting with the post search databases and getting those things set up. And then after that, we're going to go through our states, our trajectories, our motion matching nodes, stuff like that, right? And, chooser tables, etc. So in the beginning, when we started this series, we should have done 4 plugins already, or installed 4 plugins, which should be the post search, chooser, animation insights, and animation warping. 3 of those we technically need, we don't need the insights, but it does help us with debugging and seeing trajectories and other stuff, right? So basically, let me go ahead and pull it over. So we are going to need to open up the Lyra Starter Project, and we're going to need these animations in particular. So we're going to want to grab the idle hip fire, and then the rifle walk backward, forward, left, right, jog, backward, forward, left, right, and we need our stops, our normal locomotion, and then our pivots. So at least these 8 of each one. And so what we're going to be doing is getting we're going to move all of the animations over, and I'm going to show you which ones in particular that we're going to be moving over, because we're not going to do the entirety of it. I'll show you something cool later when we do it, but we're going to do the basic stuff first. So that's what we're going to need to do and migrate them over. So let's go ahead and get started in migrating it over. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Lyra Starter Project, and I want you to do the same thing, and I will see you when mine is loaded. Alrighty everybody, I am back. So I have the Lyra Starter Project open and everything, and so in order to get the animations that we need to get our post search databases and stuff started, we do need to go here into Content Browser, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to Characters, and then Heroes, and then the Mannequin folder, and then Animations, and then right here into the Locomotion folder. So once we get into the locomotion folder, you'll see that we have 4 different types. We have unarmed, shotgun, rifle, and pistol. So we're going to follow primarily the Your First 60 Minutes with motion matching, where they want the rifle. However, what I am going to do too is I am going to show y'all, and after we do the Your First 60 Minutes, overlay states and whatnot, so that way you can actually utilize these different animations. But for the moment, let's go ahead and just grab rifle. And what we're going to do in here is we don't need to grab all of them. However, I am going to show y'all something cool later that involves switching between the feminine and masculine animations, which I've been putting together myself and thought it was pretty cool. But I will show you all that later. But for the moment, we're going to go ahead and grab the masculine forms of the rifle animations. So go ahead and type in rifle, and what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and get all of these. I know that they said to do the normal walks, stops, loops and stuff like that, but we're just going to go ahead and grab them all, because maybe on your own time you probably want to do a crouching one, get that set up, because I haven't done that yet myself because I've been working out other kinks for stuff. But let's go ahead and we're going to click on one of them and just highlight them all. However, we can go ahead and control click these 2 blend spaces, because we don't need to bring those over, because these are blend spaces for state machines that they made. As you can see, we have a crouch walk and then leans. We're going to be creating our own leans, and with crouch walking, we're going to be putting that into motion matching anyway, so it's not going to really matter. So let's go ahead and right click on just any one of the highlighted options, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to Asset Actions, and we're going to go to Migrate. So then for this, what we are going to do is we're just going to leave everything as default, because they even mentioned, if I go ahead and pull it up, that we want to grab right here, make sure migrate all dependent assets, including meshes, controllers, etc. to the new project, just so that way nothing breaks really when you do it. Although what we truly just need technically is all the animations, which, you know, I might just do anyway because we're going to be retargeting him, but we need the mannequins and stuff like that because it needs a proper skeleton to match it with when it gets migrated over. So that's why you'll probably see in other tutorial videos where they say that you can migrate stuff through the file browser here by just, you know, going through stuff and just copying the content folder and do that over. But the thing is what the migration's also doing is making sure that it properly pairs the animations and all the other necessities to the mannequin, the skeleton, the mesh, and everything like that. So that way it knows what to tie it to. And then after that, we can, you know, port them over, or not port them over, but like retarget them if you need to. So we're going to leave these all as checked, and we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And then what we are going to do is go ahead and go to your Unreal Projects folder, you know, depending on what you call it. Mine is just Unreal Projects. And the project that I am doing this tutorial in would be my 60 minutes tutorial. And then once you're in your tutorial, or not your tutorial folder, but your project folder, go ahead and hit content and then select folder. And then we're going to wait for it to migrate the packages. It shouldn't take too long since we're not trying to gather every animations, but it's got to do the other stuff. So I will see y'all when this is done. Alrighty gang, welcome back. So now that you've gotten all your assets migrated over, you should see a few new things like level prototyping and physics material, but then now we should have our animations, right? So if we go into our characters folder, and then you'll see now that we have a heroes folder, which is exactly what we need to be looking for. So go ahead and go into heroes, and then the mannequin folder, and then animations, and then you'll see that we have the locomotion folder. And then in the locomotion folder, we do have the rifle. And when we click into that, we do have all of the animations that we moved over. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and retarget these animations. So technically speaking, the mannequin, even though it's a blue mannequin character that you see here for the skeletal mesh and everything, you shouldn't necessarily have to retarget these animations, because as you can see with the skeleton information, as I hover over the turn right, that you'll see underneath skeleton, it's like the 5th row down where you see game, characters, heroes, mannequin, meshes, skmannequin.skmannequin. So this is already pointing to a mannequin character, not like the CBP sandbox character that you'll see in Gasp, or maybe in some like other projects where maybe somebody inserted a Ybot skeleton from Mixamo or anything like that, right? So this should theoretically work with the animations. I've tested it slightly doing that, and I haven't really seen anything that breaks, but I feel like over the long turn of things, or the long periods of time, if I can get my words out, that I feel like, because even though they're two different, they're the same skeleton mesh, I feel like because of how things are created to the blue skeleton mannequin, that there might be some tiny bit of offset somewhere with its information, its makings, and other stuff like that. So in the end, it would probably be just a safer bet, so you don't avoid any sort of errors or crashes or anything like that due to some sort of mismatch of information like deep down somewhere that you probably wouldn't have known or anything like that. Just to avoid all that, what we're just going to go ahead and do is retarget this just so we can avoid any bugs. So go ahead and click on one of these characters, and what we're going to do is hit Control A to highlight all of them. And then once you do that, go ahead and right click it, and we're going to then retarget these animations. So I'm gonna see if they come up, because for sometimes or some reason, yeah, it just takes forever for this thing to pop up. So what we're going to go ahead and do is look for the target skeletal mesh, and we're going to hit the drop down and look specifically for the SKM Manny that you see right here. That is the silver one that is within our project, because you can even see, you know, where it has the path and stuff like that to game characters, mannequins, meshes, rather than heroes or anything else like that, right? So let's go ahead and click on that. And then what we need to do is in our search assets, we need to look for the rifle animations that we had just moved over. So as you can see, all of them are right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit we're going to click and hit Control A to highlight all of them, because I believe that export retarget assets should work, but I find it a safer method, or at least a more controlled method for me, is if I look for exactly what I want to look for of stuff that I've imported or maybe you want to mess with, and then hit the export animations. So that way we can go in through here and then do our like prefixes, suffixes, replacements, you know, whatever, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go into my characters folder, and I'm going to go into mannequins and then animations. I'm pretty much going to essentially do the same thing that was in heroes, right? So then I'm going to hit my Manny folder, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click it and do new folder and create a new folder called rifle, because what I'm trying to do is maintain consistency with how the heroes folder works, right? Because you can definitely name it however you want or do whatever you want. There's no rhyme or reason. Like you can even say, for example, that these are retargeted assets. So you can make a folder name called retargeted assets, right? But it's better for consistency and simplicity if you just kind of rename it as such, because you'll know what they are, because there wasn't a rifle folder before in Manny, right? So that's what we're going to want to do. So I'm just doing that for consistency. And then what we can do is click out of it now and then click into the folder. But now what we're going to do to know for a fact that these are the animations that we have retargeted, I'm going to add a prefix to them called LSP underscore. So I'm giving it the prefix LSP to signify that these are Lyra Starter Project animations, right? And the underscore is basically to just kind of separate them by name, because if you look in the retarget animation section, that we have underscore rifle underscore crouch, because the underscore is supposed to represent spaces. So that's why I'm giving the underscore. So LSP for Lyra Starter Project, underscore for the space, and that's my prefix, because then as you can see right down here under new name of what it's going to be given. So with that being said though, I'm now going to go ahead and export, and I will see y'all when this is done. Alrighty guys, so it is done for me. I don't know why that took me a bit, but as you can see, we now should have our LSP underscore animations that we've retargeted specifically to our Silver Manny mannequin, right? So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and close out of our content browser tab, and then we can go into the content drawer. And now if we go back to the characters folder and we now go into mannequins and then animations and then Manny, you will now see that we have these rifle animations. So what we can go ahead and do, so I'm going to show you this, right? So if we go ahead and go into our rifle folder, I'm going to make two different folders just because I want some kind of like clarity, consistency, and peace of mind, right? Where I want one to be crouch, so I'm going to hit Control Shift N so to create a new folder as like my shortcut, and do crouch, and then I'm going to do Control Shift N again and make a stand folder. So then after doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in crouch to the search, if I can spell, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click and then Control A to highlight them all, but then I'm going to click the X to get rid of the crouch, just that way they all pop back up with my folders, and then I can then go ahead and click, hold, and drag over to my crouch, and then move here, and then the rest. So once this finishes, then for the rest, we can just hit Control A like this, and then uncheck these two folders by holding Control and clicking. And then we can click and drag these to the stand because they are all stands, so, or standing animations. So just that way we can have some degree of separation, you know? So that is pretty much it, because now we are going to be primarily handling the stuff in here. So just to briefly show you, I'm going to pull it back over, is that with your first 60 minutes with motion matching, the next part out of that would be going through the character blueprint, right? Where they're going to show you how to change the mannequin over to the blue SK Manny, and then changing some of the details like within the character movement component. However, that's why I went ahead and did the character blueprint right out the gate, because I wanted to get that preset up with y'all to show you, you know, basically what I'm trying to do, especially with copying these techniques from Gasp, because ever since I have, you know, reverse engineered and, you know, decoded Gasp essentially for my series, that I really do appreciate the way that I do a lot of these, you know, getting the max speeds and stuff like that, calculating walks, stuff like that, getting our strafing, right? You know, that's why I wanted to have it out of the way. So then you'll see that we're going to go to setup inputs. Well, we've already done that, right? Where we have all of our basic movements and stuff like that we need. But then you'll notice that what they're also trying to do is update the scalar for the gamepad, right? Because I believe in the setup input, I believe it was the first video, the second video that I did that I went over, where I showed you how this basically had a 50, 50, and then a 1. Well, they change it to just the 1 in here anyway for the gamepad, basically in a sense to quote unquote normalize it. Because basically what normalizing does is setting it into the number from it being so huge, like it basically divides it down into manageable number of making it either a 0 or 1, just so that way you can, you know, have better, more, I want to say in a form of like a data analysis, but like mindset kind of, you want cleaner data essentially. So that's what they're doing here, is just simplifying it to a point that is easily manageable and cleaner. So then, because even what they do here is when we go into the event graph, you know, they want to remove the jump functionality, but I'm keeping it because we are going to add a jump. And then they're going to want to add 3 variables for scaling, because what they're going to try to do, didn't mean to clear into that, is they're trying to do a clamp input scale. And so this is what I was talking about with normalizing, right? So you'll see right here where they get a vector 2D length and they do a run scale threshold. Well, we did that in our character blueprint when we were setting up the, I believe it was the get desired gates. When we did the full analog movement, we were setting up our return nodes for sprint, run, walk, stuff like that. That's what this is doing in here. And this is what we set to the 70% at in that video. But then right here, you'll see that the input scale, essentially where they're getting that is, this is the 2D vector scale that they're then normalizing to make it either a 0 or 1 value. And then they're multiplying it by their own run scale that they set, which you can see, yeah, right here to 1. So then what they're going to do after that is then clamp the input scale here, and then feed it into the input movement, and then the add movement input here as well for the forward backward, and then over here for the left right, right? But if you've seen Gasp or you've watched my tutorial videos on decoding Gasp, basically they did another thing where they just did get control rotation, and then they only got the Z and they plugged it into the Z in the right vector and the Z in the forward vector, and then they did like a normalized node. Well, I'm not gonna, well, I believe I did that in this, my other one. Let me pull up my third person blueprint real quick so I can show you exactly what I mean. So in a sense, yeah, here we go. So in a sense, this is what I did, right? Where I didn't touch the input action movement within the input movement. So if I went to third person input actions and then, or no, sorry, my apologies, the IMC default, if we go to the move and we go to gamepad and then I believe it's modifiers, yeah, right here, index and then scalar, we have 50, 50, and 1. So like I said in the one of the beginning videos that I'm doing for this series where we pre-set up the character blueprint and everything, I believe I already manually changed this to 111, because basically that's kind of like the offset movement or its value that the character will move across the world like at. There's a better way of explaining the scalar in which I'll have to put down the note in the description, but basically it's just kind of like how basically the scale value of how the character moves across like the world, like on a grand scale. But I'll get y'all a better simplified answer and put it in the comments. I just don't have that note in front of me right now because it was like an old note. But going back to it, I didn't bring it over. But essentially what they're doing with that input method is they're essentially doing this exact same thing, but in this fashion. And that's why I wanted to just preemptively make the scalar 111 in that movement mode. But this only pertains really to the gamepad, not to like the button presses, because those should already have a scalar of 111, because it's either on or it's not, that kind of thing. So, but other than that, we've already set that up pretty much, and we don't need to do this. So that's kind of why I wanted to get that out of the way. So now we get to set up our motion matching assets now that we get to do that. So we're going to go along and do that, right? So I'm going to back out to the animations folder, and here I'm going to make a motion matching data folder where we can house our motion matching databases, schemas, normalization sets, and stuff, etc., right, in our chooser table. Now, in this series, I'm going to keep it very basic with what the schema is doing, the normalization set does, and the when we go over the databases, because I plan on doing a series, after this or some other time that will, excuse me guys, that will go over all the parts in the motion matching stuff, like the looping cost biases, or reselection of nodes, PKA, DC trees, or whatever they're called, all that kind of jazz, right? Because that is pretty much the core of motion matching, is that kind of stuff. And it's important that people understand what's going on in there. It's just that I'm kind of slowly doing my research at that, because it is kind of a lot to go over. But other than that, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's go into our motion matching database, our data folder, and we're going to create 3 different folders just to have a degree of separation. You don't have to do this, but again, we want to maintain consistency, and we want to maintain a degree of separation so we know where things are at, right? So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it schemas, because this is where we're going to house all of our schemas. Even though it's only going to be one, there are going to be times where you may have several of them and you want them all placed here, right? As you become more advanced with motion matching. Then the next one I'm going to do is normalization sets, just like that, because we will be creating a normalized set. And then the last one will be databases, just like that. So now that we got that, let's go ahead, and I'm going to open up or right click into the content browser, and we're going to go to animation. And then as you can see down here, we're going to go to motion matching, and then you'll see we have schema, normalization set, and database. Well, the first thing we need to do is right here, the post search schema, because what we're trying to do is create specify a basic format, as you can see right there, of a post search index, where at runtime queries are built according to the schema for searching. So basically it defines like how these animations are being indexed and then chosen accordingly by our databases and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to pick this one right here, the SK mannequin, because you'll see that there's 2 of them, and then this one, this is for the UE4 mannequin skeleton. This is for the blue one that we put in, because as you can see the path right there, it's under game, characters, heroes, mannequin, and meshes. So this pertains to what we migrated over, and also you can kind of tell, I did not mean to click that, my mouse was locked for some reason. Let me go back to it real quick. Boom. But you could tell that there's a bluish hue to it, or color to it when you look more closely at it. So that's why we're not going to pick that, because you could see the silverish hue or color to it. So we're going to go ahead and click this. And what we're going to call it is we're going to call it PSS for post search schema, and then underscore. And I'm going to you can call it whatever you want. But my go-tos for this, for the moment, because of how basic we're making this tutorial, is you can either do default, just like this, because we are only going to have one. So it could just be your default schema, or you can just call it mannequin, like so. However, I'm going to copy your first 60 minutes in motion matching, because what they call it is PSS mannequin when they do it. So we're going to create that, and then we're going to move it into the schemas folder so it's there. But other than that, we're not doing anything more to it. That's all that they do for it, right? So that's why I'm saying I'm trying to keep this basic, but like I said, in a future series, I will be going over everything related to schemas, databases, normalization sets, chooser tables, etc. Just because that is the core of motion matching, and I feel like everybody needs to know that. So now we can go ahead and go into databases, and this is where I'm going to make some different folders, right? So if you remember, what we have to do at the getting started, right? Where we're going to need some of these, right? So we're going to need our idles, starts, stops, locomotion, and pivots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these separate folders for the types of gate that we're doing. I'm not going to do an individual folder for, start, stops, locomotion, pivots. What I'm going to specifically do is do idles, and then I'm going to do walk, and then jog, and then I'll also do a jump to show you how we can do a jump, right? So let's go ahead and do a new folder, and I'm going to call it idle. Then I'm going to create a new one called walk, and then a new one called run, and then a new one called jump. Or you can call it in air, whichever you feel comfortable with. There's no, like I said, a lot of this stuff is more or less like my rhyme or reason to doing it. You can have your own rhyme or reason to naming them however you want. So that's, kind of one of the things I want to preface is that, one of the things that helps you get better with being able to do Unreal Engine and this kind of stuff is just kind of do it out, like do small modifications like outside of the tutorials or walkthroughs that you see, so you can get a better grasp of that. Just because you named it differently doesn't mean that the core functionality changes, right? So that's why I'm not doing an idles, starts, stops, locomotion, pivots, because we're going to have everything related to walk in one folder, everything related to run in one folder, then everything related to jump, everything related to idle. So first thing we're going to do now is let's go ahead and make our databases. So we're going to make a few of them, right? We're going to make quite a few. So to make a pose search database, we're going to go up to animation, and then we're going to go to motion matching, and then pose search database, as you see right here. So what we're going to do is, I was about to explain it, but what we're going to do real quick, just because we have it up, is we're going to go ahead and select our pose search schema mannequin, because every database needs to be attached to a schema, because the schema is how it indexes all of these animations within the database. So that way, when you actually do your chooser table, have your functionalities for stuff, it knows where to find those animations and then in what kind of order or preference it needs to play them out at due to certain stats that are being ran within these the schema into the database. So let's go ahead and hit our PSS mannequin, and we're going to call this one PSD, and I'm going to call it rifle idle, or I'll do rifle stand idle, something like that, right? Because the reason that I'm doing that is because if we go to our stand animations, right, and you don't have to follow me on this, but you could see that we have, like the masculine rifle idle break, or at least where is it, idle hip fire, which is the one that we'll be looking for, right? So, but also I'm preferencing that it's a stand because in our crouch we should have where is it? It should be, yeah, right here, crouch idle. So that's why I wanted to preface it by saying stand idle in the off chance that you decide to go ahead and make the didn't mean to go out of that. In case you intend to make your crouch like ahead of this video series. So now that we got that, we do need several more. So I'm going to clone that, and I'm going to call this one, let me see, what were all the things that we're going to need? Yep, so we need to do, did not mean to click out of that. So I'm going to do the walks here. So we're going to do the walk, call it starts, and then stops, and then loops, and then pivots, just like that. So in your first 60 minutes of motion matching, they decide to put idles and stops in the same database, and they also decide to put walks and pivots and runs and pivots in their own respective same databases. But I want that degree of separation because I want to show you simpler forms of the gasp pure functions, where we'll be making an is pivoting, is starting, is stopping, is moving, and clearly making defined variable decisions that are so very easy to understand and show you like how basic you can make this stuff, right? So that's what we're going to be doing here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the idle over into the idle, and then I'm going to move 3 of these into the walk already, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out duplicating this for our run. So it looks like this is going to be our stops. So I'm going to do run stops just to at least have the run name started, and then we're going to start duplicating this. So I'm going to fast forward through this for a moment, but basically it's the same gist. You're going to make a starts, loops, and pivots off of this stops. All right, I am back. So now that we have made that, what we can do is we can technically go ahead and throw that into run, but what I'm going to do real quick is I am going to just make a duplicate, and I'm just going to call this our stand jumps, because there are going to be 3 jumps that we put into here, but that'll be for later. What we're going to do is we're going to focus primarily on the runs, walks, and idles, and then I'll show y'all how to do the jumps later. But for the moment, let's go ahead and move them into their respective folders, and then we can go ahead and get started on those. So now, once we have that, let's go ahead and we're going to jump into idle, and we're going to work on that first, right? Or at least, yeah, we're going to start on that first, just because there is some things to kind of go over with that, right? So we're going to go ahead and going to go into the content drawer, and we're going to go ahead and look for our animations, right? So we're going to go into because we're under characters, mannequins, and you'll see that we have manis and stuff like that. Let's go to the animations. We're going to go into the mani folder, and then our rifle folder, and then our stand folder that we've made. So right off the bat, we should have the idle stuff already here for us, but the one that we want for the moment just to copy your 60 minutes of motion matching is the hip fire. And I will show how to do the aim down sight for the idle and stuff like that, but that'll be part of that later extra tidbit once we're done with this actual series. So for this one, there is a few things that we kind of need to do, right? So we do need to do some flag changing that they mentioned under the walks. So just to show you what we need to change, right? Because it's going to be the same thing for jogs, idle and stop, and walks, as you can see here. And just to quickly show you, you could see where they're putting the pivots and the walks and stuff together here. I just didn't want to do that. But basically, we're going to make these changes, right, to every single one of the databases that we put our animations in. So all of our non-pivoting animations are going to be looping. So anything that basically like the idle hip fire, the walking loops, the run loops, and then the jump fall loop, but again, I'll show you the jump one later, needs to be set to looping. So within our hip fire, what we're going to do is we're going to double click to just open that up since it's already right there. And to change it to looping, all you need to do is within this whole animation thing is you'll see right here, loop. You're just going to check that and then save it. And then you can just close out of it to where now you should see looping. However, what we want to do after that with doing the looping is we want to go ahead and toggle off the reselection of poses or the reselection of poses. And the reason for that is because with the simple answer to that, I got to do more research into it to understand why we're doing that, is because what we're trying to do for one is we're going to be changing these looping animations to take more preference over certain other stuff by changing the bias. But the reselection of poses doesn't work well or play nicely with loops because it's going to tend to try to favor the loops more and constantly reselect those, especially when we adjust the looping cost bias. So we don't want to be constantly reselecting the loop. The loop needs to play out accordingly to the variables and stuff that we set. But for example, pivots, because pivoting is not happening often and it happens for a short duration, we are not going to be enabling looping on the pivots, and we need to be able to toggle on the reselection of poses because they need to be able to be eligible for reselection when we go to play them for the short burst period that we play those at. So that's why we toggle off the reselection of poses, but then we set it to looping because it doesn't need to be constantly eligible for reselection, because as we're moving around and doing stuff, we're going to be looping anyway. It's going to be playing out. So that's why that is important. So in saying that, since we got the looping enabled and we've toggled off the reselection of poses, we need to come down here now to the looping cost bias, and we need to make it a lower number. And so since it's already in the negatives, we need to make it even more negative, right? So what they suggest is putting it to negative 0.01. So the reason for this, and I'll hover over it so you can see, is that the looping cost bias, this cost is added to all looping animation assets in the database. This allows users to make it more or less likely to pick the looping animation segments. Negative values make it more likely to be picked or stayed in. Positive values make it less likely to be picked or stayed in. So that's one of the things too, where, you know, what they originally intended to do, and I'm gonna drag it back over so you can see, is how they have all the walk stuff with it, right? Like they got the backwards loops and the pivots in one database for their walks, but then their normal loops, like these guys right here on the outer edges, those are the looping animations because those are our normal walking animations. But then our pivoting are not looping because, again, those are short burst played animations. Because of how you pivot, you go the other way, and it's a very quick animation that happens. We don't want that to loop. And so since we toggle those off, we need to give more preference to the looping animations so that way they play out more than the pivoting. Because there could be some things that you put in to define your pivoting functionality and stuff like that, where it could play together or over top of the looping, and we don't want that. So that's why it's important to do that. But then again, we also want the pivoting to be reselected. But again, we'll go over that when we get there. So that is pretty much it for the looping. There's nothing else that really needs to be done with it because we've already set that appropriately, right? So let's go ahead and save it, right? And I'm not going to close it yet because I want you to get a gauge of what we're trying to do now, right? So let's go ahead and go back into animations, our motion matching database, and then our databases. And then what we're going to do is let's work on the walks real quick, because then I'm going to fast forward through the runs once we go over the walks, just so you can play that out. But essentially with the runs, you're going to copy exactly what I do for the walks, right? So for these, let's go ahead and open up all of these real quick, just so we have them tagged at the top. Just like that. And then what we are going to do, and let me bring my thing up real quick because there is something that I got to check for y'all just to make sure that I don't mess anybody up. So let me see, it's my notes right in here. Yes, so I got them here. And then just to make sure, I think it's going to open up over here. Yep. All right, cool. That's what I wanted to make sure. So what we're going to do now is we have our loops, we have our pivots, we have our starts, and we have our stops. From the pivots to the stops, we are going to make sure that they are not looping and that reselection of the pose stuff is working, right? So first, let's start with our loops. So for our loops, what we're going to do is let's go to our animations, our Manny rifle stand. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for all of our walk animations within this folder, right? So you'll see that a lot of them come up. But specifically what we want is stuff like this, right? The walk backward, and then the walk forward, and then the, where is it? The left, and then the right. So we're going to do this one right here, because you can even tell it says pivot and then start and then stop. So it's pretty easy to understand which one are our loops, starts, pivots, and stops. So I'm going to control select these ones to go ahead and grab. And then once we have that, we can go ahead and throw them in. So you should have for your loops the backward, forward, left, right. So for these ones, what we are going to go ahead and do is don't unselect these just yet. We do need to modify these because unless you want to open these one by one in here, it's just better to open up a property matrix to edit this real quick. So now that we have those highlighted, go ahead and go to right click and go to Asset Actions and then go to Edit Selection and Property Matrix. So here what we're going to do is we're going to click on one of these and hit Control A. So that way we can select all of these named animations, and we want to toggle all of these on to be looping. So now that we have that, all of them should be starred and ready to save. So go ahead and hit save at the top, and then we can go ahead and close this out and then go back to our walk, and we should see that, yep, looping is enabled. So now for all of these, just to copy what we did with the idle because of how we have to set non-pivot animations, is we need to untoggle the reselection of poses because we have looping on. These will be played out constantly. Then for these, what we need to do too is for our database is we need to set this to -0.01 just to make sure that our looping animations takes precedence over the starts, stops, and pivots. So now that we got that, I'm going to go ahead and save it, and I'm going to go into the walk pivots. And now for here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of our pivots. So it should be pivot, forward pivot, and then where's it at? Left pivot, and then right pivot. And there we go. We have all of our pivots there. We do not need to toggle looping on, and we're going to keep the reselection on. But again, because we don't have looping enabled, we do not need to worry about those bias costs. We can keep it at the -0.005 because it is in mathematical sense a higher number because it is theoretically closer to 0 than -0.1. So we got that done and out of the way. So let's go ahead and save that and go into our starts. And we're going to then grab all of our start animations. I believe it's right here and then right here. We got that. And again, these are going to be similar to the pivots because these starts happen for short bursts. So no looping, reselection on, and then keep it at a higher cost bias. So 0.5. Save that, and then do the same thing for the stops. So for the stops, we're going to now grab all of our stop animations, and these ones are pretty simple to see because it's like, you know, a big idle dude like right there. And so again, same thing here. We don't need to loop them. Keep the reselection on and keep the looping cost bias where it's at. So there we go. We now have our looping hip fire animation, and then we have our looping locomotion, and then we have our short burst pivots, starts, and stops. So now that we have all that, I'm going to close these down, and we're going to do the exact same thing with the runs. However, I am going to speed through the runs, but I'm going to get you to the starting point first. So with that, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and go back to animations, motion matching data, databases, and then we're going to go into our runs. And we're now going to open all of these up. Just like so. Boom. So now that we got that, let me, it's not going to do that. So let me go ahead and do this because it's not going to let me. I don't like how they're separately tabbed like that. So that's why I'm just going to like quickly move them over here. All right, cool. So now that we got that, so our first one should be loops, then we got our pivots, then our starts, then our stops. So it's going to be the exact same thing that we did for our walks, right? So if we go back into animations, Manny, rifle, stand, they're not named runs. I just call it runs so that way we can tell the difference between our walks and idles and jumps and whatnot. But we're going to search for our jogs now. We're going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to look for all of our normal stuff. So we're going to do jog forward. And don't grab the raw. I don't know why there's a raw one in here. I don't know what it is for. However, just avoid putting that one in. We only need the backward, forward, left, and right. Normal loops, just like so. Just like that, to where we have them set just like this. And then again, while we have them highlighted, we're going to do the same thing as the walks. And we are going to modify them in the property matrix, so that way we can have them all as looping. So go ahead and highlight them all, and then we're going to check off the looping and then save it. And then we can close out of here. And then lastly, the last two things we need to do before I leave you on your own for the pivots, starts, and stops is deselect the reselection of pose options, and then let's make the cost bias negative 0.01. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and I'm going to run through these, but you're going to do the same thing that we did with the walks. You're just going to port them in. You don't have to do anything more. Just grab your pivots, throw them in here, go to your starts, throw them in, stops, throw them in, and then you're essentially done. So I'm going to just go ahead and speed through these now. Alrighty everybody, I am back. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and save everything. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S to save everything. And now we can go ahead and close these out, and we can focus on our next part now, where we are going to normalize our databases. This one's going to be pretty simple, so it's going to kind of move it over. Basically what we're doing is this part right here, where it's like, lastly, we're going to create a normalization asset. This asset should be used in cases where you expect to dynamically switch the active database, as we'll set up later. Once you've created the normalization asset, we can go ahead and add all our databases to it. And it's like, you will need to open each of your databases and set the normalization asset on them. So I am going to show you how to do that as well. So what you're going to go ahead and do is, let's go ahead and go back into, I need to undo that filter. Go back into our motion matching data folder, and then our normalization sets. And then we are going to go to animation, motion matching, and then normalization set. And we're going to call this one, normally what I like to do is call it PSNS, because it's a post-search normalization set, but they call it PSN. You're more than welcome to call it however you want, but I'm going to call it PSNS, just that way you know it's a normalization set. And then we're going to call it locomotion, just like what they did, because technically I think the locomotion name to it is pretty good. That's, you know, I would like to set it to that, because technically now we're going, like we're doing is we're going to be adding our databases to it, to where it's now going to be responsible for our locomotion and a dynamically, you know, switch between databases that we assign it. So go ahead and open that up, and what we're going to do is we're going to make the amount of arrays in here equal to the number of databases we have. So if we go into the animations we're going to go into animations, motion matching data, databases. We should have 4 in the walk, 4 in the run, and then 1 in the idle. So that would be 9 of them that you would have to put in here. 10 once we make the jump, but again, that's going to be a later thing. So let's go ahead and make 9 array elements, just like that. And now we're going to go through and put all of our post search databases in there. So we have our idle, then we have, not the stand jumps. We're going to have the run loops, run pivots, run starts, run stops, and then go ahead and put in your walk loops, walk pivots, walk starts, and walk stops, just like that. And then now we can go ahead and save that. And then what we do need to do now, unfortunately, is we do need to reopen all these, because with us adding a normalization set, it does not tag them here in normalization set. So we do have to manually put them in there. You know, I would have done the normalization set first, but you have to create the databases first to then apply them to the normalization set. Then you have to go back into it. So let's go ahead and just real quick run through it and open all of these up before we assign them all the normalization set. So then once we got all of our runs, let's go and do all of our walks. Don't die on me now. There we go. There we go. Content drawer. All right, so now we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and work backwards, adding all of our normalization sets. So you're gonna go down to each one of them underneath tags, and then go to normalization set, and you're just gonna select the only thing that's available, which is the locomotion normalization set. And you're gonna apply that to every single one of these. So I'm gonna fast forward through this real quick, guys. Alrighty guys, so now that once you've done all of that, let's go ahead and hit Control-Shift-S to save all of those. And now we can finally close those down, and then we can essentially call, I believe, this video done. Let me double check something real quick, because now that we've set up that, now we would be working on the animation blueprint. Yep, we will be working on the animation blueprint next. So I'm going to call it for this video, guys. So if you did enjoy that, I hope you found it educational, whatnot. I'd greatly appreciate it if you check out my other videos and future videos to come. But other than that, guys, look forward to the next part in the animation blueprint series, where we're going to be going over, this kind of stuff. Let me go ahead and bring it over for you. So, we're going to do something similar to what I did within the character blueprint, where we're going to separate our event graphs just so we can have our event begin play within the normal event graph. Or let me see, how did I assign it in here under the character blueprint? That'll determine how I do it real quick for y'all. Let's see. Okay, I just called it input action. So I guess what I did was, I guess I won't separate it per se within the animation blueprint unless y'all really want to. But so I guess I'll just keep it pretty simple within the animation blueprint here. Oh, and another thing before y'all go, one thing that I did change up in here. I did change a couple things. Or actually, no, this is for the, yeah, this is for this. So I did add the is moving on ground component and a branch for the jump just to kind of make it a little bit more realistic for me. But then another thing too, what I did was for our walk input, in case y'all were wondering why you couldn't toggle to your between walk and not walking, was because we do have to set this up a second time onto our false path. So that way, kind of how I explained how the once to walk works here. When we set it to walking, to true and whatnot, that we begin walking, but then clicking it again will then reset this to a false thing. So if I show y'all what I mean by that, when I hit play, if I go to walk, you can see we're walking, but then if I hit my left alt again, we go back to walking. So that was what the issue was, in case y'all were wondering. So, those are the slight fixes that I did in regards to that, if you guys wanted to add that yourself. But other than that, that is pretty much all that I wanted to show y'all for this end, guys. So again, if y'all did enjoy this, please check out my other videos and be on the lookout for my future videos to come. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a great rest of your day and take care.